Hey everyone, we are about to dive into a personal video diary of the murder house case from my perspective. And before we begin, I'm going to light up a cigar and enjoy this beautiful winter night here in Austin, Texas. So bear with me while I get this started. As you know, you obviously will have wanted to have already listened to the Murder House series in its entirety before you hear this actual diary. So if you haven't heard the Murder House series, don't listen to this right now. Save this for when you're finished. We'll see if this becomes a tradition. I'm going to be smoking a Cavalier, Connecticut right now. I got this from the Cigar Vault in Buda, which was featured in the Buda Antique Mall series. The guys there, Kirby and Brian, are fantastic, and I love their selection, and their customer service is awesome. But that's not what we're talking about. Let's dive into the Murder House case. I have notes here, so you might see me referencing them because there was so much that happened, and it was a while ago. So I'm trying to remember it all because we're already on new cases. I'm on 2 new cases as we speak, and we've already done another one. So 3 cases since already. But yeah, what we're going to talk about here is my sort of perspective of the case, how I felt going into it, how I felt while I was in it, and even the post-traumatic stress issues after the case because it was a very intense one. And then also things that are like our updates and things like that. And then also questions that you guys have posted about wanting to know certain things. I can't answer all of them. I'm going to try to answer as many as I can. And then we'll go from there. All right. So as you know, the Murder House case to date feels like the darkest case we've ever had, and rightfully so. It definitely was. For me personally, it was one of the most difficult cases, actually the most difficult case I think I took on. And I took it on very carefully. Alexis had called me about the case, told me, he'd heard from John at Green and White that there was somebody that was in need. Alexis heard Martin's needs and the situation, and then he suggested to me that we should probably pursue that as an actual case. I immediately was hesitant, had a lot of reservations because it's such a traumatic experience that I would be potentially be putting Sarah into. That's kind of one of the biggest reservations I had before I even said yes to the case, because one, she is still somewhat new to this, her gift and using her ability to kind of be put into these situations, and 2, we'd never really put her in a situation with that much trauma in it. I still wasn't 100% sure if what she was going to see was the murder victims, but I thought, it's a very high likelihood that she would, and I didn't want her to go through that. I didn't want her to experience that much trauma, that much pain, that much anguish, because from what I'd heard from the case, is it was, a traumatic death for the 2 victims. Although one was quick, the male victim died quickly. The female victim was stabbed repeatedly, and then possibly shot and killed. And so I just didn't want to put Sarah through that, but at the same time, I didn't want this family suffering. So, we went through it, we talked about it, agreed that we were going to approach it carefully, and we did. So, from that point on, Alexis and I did our first initial investigation. And so what was going on there is I went there and I was nervous about the location, the death that had happened on the property. but also I was kind of going to take it cautiously with like how I read the clients. It was a personal case again, much like the rest of the series, and I didn't want to jeopardize their well-being, judge them for what they're experiencing, even though some of it might be, I had to be careful with how I treaded those waters. Um, so that was difficult. But obviously, you all heard the story about what we did and what we encountered, so I don't want to rehash any of that. I want to jump to some of the more personal aspects of the case that really got to me, and then also things that I didn't really talk about on the episodes. So let me go to my notes here real quick. Actually, I need to run in and grab my notes. I printed them out, and I didn't even grab them, which that's no good for y'all. So yeah, this is real candid. I'm actually going to run in because I don't want to break this recording up, and I'm going to go get those and enjoy the peace and quiet of my backyard for literally 5 seconds. Okay, sorry about that, y'all. This new recording thing, it's a pain in the butt if I have to break it up, so thank you for putting up with this. This is our first actual video diary that's going to be pretty involved and intensive, so I didn't want to break it up and make it more difficult on this end. So there's some things that, obviously I was anxious about, and I'm going to go over some of that right now. Getting Sarah involved was the main issue that concerned me the most. I wasn't also certain about the validity of the claims that Martin was mentioning, just because of his personality when we first met. Seemed very susceptible to believe in anything that happened and assume that it was paranormal. So I was really careful when I interviewed and cross-examined him and Veronica and all the other people that were there. But there's some other things that I need to kind of go into that I want to talk about after I've gone through some of the other things that we didn't mention in the case. So there's some high anxiety things that came from this case for me personally that I want to reveal to you later at the end of this video diary. So let's jump into some of the things that we didn't really talk about. One is a major thing that has a lot of spider webbing off pathways that we went on that I didn't include on the episode. So we got to the location. Obviously, we did our interviews, and we assessed that Martin was having experiences. There was something on the property, and it felt a little dark, a little unnerving. We didn't know if it was tied to the murder victims. Obviously, that's where our mind went because we knew of the tragedy, and so did he. But we didn't know exactly what this dark presence he was feeling was. The one that pushed him in the shower, the one that seemed to be ominous in the backyard, the one that hung around the back shed area, and the one that sort of messed with him in the garage, those sort of things. The things that happened on the first night that we didn't put in the episode, or we might have put tidbits of it, but I don't think I elaborated on it, is that we found elements on the property that led Alexis to believe that there was some Santeria practices that had previously occurred on the premises of that property. Those things were, Martin had told us about the Hispanic family that had lived there prior to him and Veronica getting the place. And that was after the murders and then before Veronica and Martin moved there. So there was a small period of time where there was another family there. And so the items that Martin had pulled out for us to look at that he discovered were not only abandoned paperwork. You're talking about social security numbers, driver's license, citizenship paperwork, things like that. There was also things that he found in the yard. So in the yard, Martin had found these really tall, almost perfectly cylindrical, white-barked poles. Actually sticks, but they look like poles because they were so smooth. So these sticks were in various parts of the yard. There was only two of them, I believe. Then there was the odd red stone. He had said he'd seen more stones, but that was the only one we could find that night. Then there was also rock, like a big large river stone that had writing on it, and he couldn't recall all the writing, I believe, and he gave us some tidbits of it. But those things were making Alexis's like lights go off, and he knew that to be very similar to some practices with Santeria. I believe the stick is called a palo, and you can do things with it, you can curse things with it, etc. And also you can inscribe things on stones and make them happen or come to fruition. Those are parts of certain ceremonies. Alexis knows more about that than I do, so I'm not going to ramble on about that. But this particular set of things and events that we were uncovering really made us question about the property and if something darker had happened on it prior to us arriving there. And Martin swore up and down, and so did Veronica, that that was all there when they got the property. Sorry, I have to make sure this doesn't go out because this is a really good cigar. From that point on, it was already in the back of our heads that we needed to keep an eye out, and we need to look for signs of a curse. And those can include a lot of things. There were an array of things, but a lot of it is bad luck. Someone experiencing, negative things on the property or in their personal lives. And as the case went on, you'll recall that Martin had lost his job, had lost the ability to sleep at all, had insomnia, and had begun some arguments and relationship issues were happening within him and Veronica's relationship. And on top of that, we were just noticing, they didn't call it out, but Alexis and I were noticing that the house was in disarray. It was a mess. I mean, it was really hard to walk through. Meanwhile, you have a child in the home, Isaac, who had, mental disability and also some handicaps, being blind and such. And there's just all these elements that were making us feel uneasy about the case, other than just the trauma that had already happened there. There was this new sense of dread and negativity around this new family. And we didn't know if that stemmed from something that happened in between the murdered victims and Martin and Veronica taking over the property. Sorry. I gotta make this fun for myself too. So, as we went on, it got a little worse. Like, things were happening, things were progressing. Sarah picked up on this darker male presence, who was Hispanic and older and seemed to be from an older time on the property. There was a lot of theories about it could have been someone that died at the house prior, even before the murder victims had owned the property. So then we wondered if this land is cursed, if there's something about the property that goes beyond these people that came and might have performed some sort of ritual. And going back to that, we were assuming that another thing that kind of troubled us and was bothersome was that there was a potential, because Alexis knows a lot more about these practices, as he goes, when there's been a tragedy and a violent death like that had occurred there, the double homicide, people that practice sort of the dark arts of Santeria and things like that could take advantage of that negative energy. They could hold some of the spirits hostage and use them to their advantage. There's a lot of things that could happen, and being that these previous tenants were of some sort of Latin descent, either Hispanic or otherwise, and that they had all these signs like the palo sticks, the writing on the rocks, and the things that were going on around the home just drew up a bunch of red flags for us. And so then, I don't know if I put this in the episode or not. I don't think I did, and if I did, I didn't elaborate. Sarah has a really horrible dream, or not a dream. a visitation of sorts in her sleep of a spirit. And this was like when we were getting almost through with this case. She saw like an elder, and they were holding what looked like a palo stick, similar to the ones that were on the property. And this one had bells on it. And Sarah was having a difficult time getting up and communicating. She was somewhat frightened, and she realized and started to notice that each time she tried to talk, to say something, to wake Renee up, or to communicate to this elder male presence, that seemed like he was like an ancestor, an elder. He wore sort of like spiritual garb. He would stomp the stick and shake it or stomp it, one of the two, and the bells would rattle, and she would immediately start coughing. So it would cause her to cough and be unable to speak and talk. So she couldn't wake anyone up properly, only just by coughing, and she couldn't communicate with this spirit that she was seeing. In telling Alexis and I this, Alexis quickly realized that that is clearly a sign of Santeria, because they use those bells on the stick. So we don't know. We never got any closure on that particular theory we had, and that somehow or some way this property had some sort of Santeria ties, some sort of practices maybe, or previous tenants doing some sort of ritual at some point in time on this property. And numerous Mexican American or Latin people lived on these premises. So I don't know if any of them in particular had this sort of spiritual practices or belief systems, but it's definitely worth thinking about, and we thought about it long and hard. And it was really hard to cut all that out, because it was a lot of interesting pathways we went on, but it was just too much to put into this already long series. So I hope you enjoyed some of that sidebar information. I'm going to talk about some more stuff regarding Sarah and some other things that she noticed on the property for the first time. Wow, I don't know what that was. That sounded terrifying. Something just screamed in my backyard. I think it was just a cat. So, I'm going to slow down a little bit because talking really fast, I guess because I've never done this before. I like talking on a mic. I don't like talking in front of a camera. But let me look over my notes for a second and enjoy my whiskey here. So the other thing that we mentioned, and this isn't a whole lot of new stuff, but I kind of wanted to just elaborate on it more because I was there for the experience. Sarah began to see what she was referring to, Alexis was referring to as elementals. And elementals are spirits that never inhabited a human form. They are naturally forming from the environment or from the earth, and hence the word elementals, elements from the earth. They're powerful beings, and a lot of people, are somewhat afraid of them. And they can be good, can be bad. A lot of times you just, apparently according to Alexis, is just showing them respect for the land is all they really want. So when Sarah first started seeing what she now refers to as elementals, she didn't know what they were. They looked like oddly formed people moving unnaturally across the backyard of the property. Alexis had started doing a cleansing one night, and we were back there. And it's the first time she saw him. I think this was on Sarah's first visit. While I tell this story, I'm going to try to find something for y'all. Hopefully I can find it here. There it is. So these things were moving across the yard in the dark. We had like a low-laying cloud of what looked like fog, but it was kind of like smog because it was from Alexis's smoke offering. And it was night, and it was settling on the ground. And Sarah could see these elementals moving on like all fours, and like they had oblong features, and they were digging in a certain part of the yard and going into this hole. And she could not describe them, she could not draw them. She was trying really hard, and it weirded her out, but she felt like that place where they were going in was important. And later on, like throughout our cases, we become really good friends with Royal Legion Tattoo, the tattoo parlor featured on our first episode, located at the Spider House. And Ray, the co-owner there, and Kevin, and all of the guys there just become amazing friends. And we go there all the time. And now that we have our own little shops there, like I have my spirit parlor that I'm going to be opening up soon, and Alexis has City Alchemist there right below their shop. We're there all the time. So during this case, we're there, Sarah's there, and we're just talking about the murder house case because it's bothering all of us. It's a tough one, and we're just kind of talking with the guys, verbalizing all of our thoughts, our theories, our ideas. And Ray whips out a piece of paper and asks Sarah to describe the elemental. And so Ray starts drawing what Sarah's describing. I'm going to hold this up and see if you can see it. See if I can get it. And it's not exactly it. Sarah was having a hard time describing it, but as you can see, there's the head. The arms were like elongated with their elbows back. The back legs looked like grasshopper legs in a way, and the hands were like roots, and it was, pretty much like an earthy element creature, and it was moving downward into a hole. And so Ray was able to like quickly sketch this out. So thanks, Ray, for helping us out in the middle of this case. We didn't really talk a whole lot about the elementals because they were just a sidebar part of this show about this episode, but they were interesting. I think the property there had a lot of energy outside of the energy that were from the living spirits that had lost their lives there. I think there was a running water that cut across there. There's a creek, a lot of woods, and even when we spoke with Elaine Ireland on the phone, and she remote viewed the place, she described the setting without ever seeing it. And she said, yeah, the land is there's a lot of energy there, and there's a lot of memories there. I think these land elementals, for some reason, are drawn there or have always been there, and maybe the acts that occurred on the property, the murders, and maybe if there was Santeria practices, it could have potentially upset these elementals, and they were pushed further away or kind of on guard. And as we slowly worked through the case, Alexis made specific offerings for these elementals and for the land spirits. We saw them grow. Well, we didn't, Sarah did. And by the end of our case, you can hear it on the last episode, Sarah is standing there in awe while Alexis is finishing his ceremony. And I'm recording it all, and I'm just watching Sarah because I'm like, what is she looking at? And she literally is, I'll see if I can imitate her, but she's just like dazed, looking up, and very high up, like 3-story, 4-story building high. And I eventually was like, what are you seeing? And she's like, the elemental, there's one, and it's just massive. It's huge. So yeah, the one that she saw at the end, I think, wasn't quite like this one. I don't know fully what that one looked like, but I could just see it in her eyes that she was just so mesmerized by it. And it was a smile, like she was smiling at it, so she wasn't afraid of it. But she did mention that it was very powerful and that she would not want to upset it ever. So, and it started roaming on the actual property itself again. She said that it wasn't there before, but now that Alexis was inviting it and apologizing for past transgressions and things like that, that it actually started coming onto the property and roaming it and like patrolling its grounds. So that was pretty cool. We have seen another one since, and another large one at a tour we took of Pioneer Farms. We took a tour group for a ghost tour, and on the Native American Tonko encampment site at night, Sarah saw one, and it was bigger, I think, than the one at this murder house case. Again, just so interesting to even consider what these things could look like if they are in fact real. I'm just curious about what they really want or what their purpose is and what they really look like. Anyway, I don't want to let my cigar die. That's a good one. I love that one. Cavalier. I think it's. I know it's a Connecticut. I think it's a Connecticut. It's got a gold leaf on it. It's pretty cool. But now, onto more personal, more darker aspects of this case that I don't like talking about. And actually, the case is settled a little bit, on my end, not on the solving of the case and the murder victims at peace. I still feel like that has a long way to go. But I was in the thick of it, and I was nervous during the time because it honestly rattled me. It was like, if you could say a word, I was completely rattled by this case. I don't. I'm interested in true crime. I know a lot of people are, but it bothers me. True crime comes home with me. I'm a little paranoid and anxious when it comes to this sort of situation. And when I took on this case, I knew that I was taking on something that was going to probably come home with me. Not maybe in the literal or spiritual sense, but more like the mental sense. But I would soon find out that something else would come home with me. So I would come home. I knew about the case, and the case it's out there. Like all the controversy, the theories about the suspects, it exists on the internet. People have written articles on it. It's in the news. This town is not in Austin, and I've kept it private because while I was on this case, I did not want it being outed that we were working on this case, because there was a lot of elements that were scary about it that could actually jeopardize our safety if they were true. So let me talk about those. And I'm still going to keep this case private, but I'm going to reveal some things I did not reveal on the show because at the time sensitivity of us being in the middle of the case, I did not want it leaking out what case we were on. And now I'm going to reveal some things that no one else knows based on this case. And I'm still not going to reveal names or the name of the town or intricate details about certain parts of the murder or the case, but I'm going to give you more than what I gave you on the show. So, I might have mentioned some of this, but I'm going to go for it and just tell you some extra tidbits. So, the male victim was friends with this female victim. She had traveled from an outside town quite a bit of ways. And on the day she arrived to the male victim's house, the murder occurred. There's a lot of theories. It's so shocking to a lot of the family and to the people of the town because the male was a really good guy, opened his doors to anyone, that type of thing. Even the family are devastated. And the female victim had some darker seated past with some former spouses, etc. And there's a lot of theories about a spouse being the reason for this murder. On the other side, there's beliefs that someone connected to the male victim could have potentially done this. So there's all this going on, and I know all this, and I read articles, and I investigate the police like reports and all that stuff. And what's going on is I hear that there should have been DNA under the female victim's fingernails. Because of the murder and the act, there was multiple stabbings. I believe I even heard up to like 30 stab wounds. Some very, very traumatizing stuff done to the body, post-mortem, I believe, as well. Same thing with the male victim, I believe. And there was rumor, or it was written out, and it was even in other people's verbal testimony to me that there was DNA of the murderer under the girl's fingernails because she fought back. So clearly, with that, they could have ran those tests. They could have ran those against the suspects, found a murderer. There's a lot of theories out there that this was the act of either complete police negligence or a police cover-up. And so that's where the case was very sensitive for me and my team. My team is like my family. I wanted to keep them safe. My wife's on the team. I'm not going to put anybody that I love and care about in jeopardy. So the worry I had was we're investigating a case with a psychic about an unsolved double homicide in a town so small that the police would inevitably probably hear about it. And the things I wrestled with were, if we got evidence or if we got clues from Sarah or for anything else, I would have liked to have taken those to the police. I mean, who else do you go to in that situation, But in this situation, looking at all the different testimony and all the different accounts, I couldn't get myself to even fathom calling the police or trying to get an interview with them because I was like, I don't want them. I don't know who on that team, if there was a cover up, who's involved. And what went through my mind, and has nothing to do with, this is all theory in my own head. This is not because I found some clues or nothing like that. But I theorized, well, if the person who did this, somehow someone in the police department was related or knew them, they're going to cover it up for them, So if I'm coming to them prying, saying we have a medium that's able to see and talk to the dead, and we're getting answers, I don't want that one person, if they do exist, if there was a cover up, to be like, well, we got to cover something else up now. Those are the things that were kind of running through my head of being like, you don't want to jeopardize my friends, my family, etc. So, we go into the case and I don't know what's going to happen. But I know that if I get a clue or something very significant, I was going to want to try to help in some way. But that's just my nature. But I'm like, I don't know how to help if there's a danger in going to the police. So there was a lot of that going on. Like every time we would find something new, I wish I could have cross-referenced it with the police. But I'll tell you why I ended up not going to the police to even try to get more information, because I would have loved that. So I have an uncle that lives not too far from here, and told him about the case, and he works within the police departments in the surrounding areas, has been doing it for years, works in a very special type of unit I won't go into it. It's a very special unit. So he's got a lot of contacts, and I told him about the case. He knows about my show, and he's really a big supporter of it. And I tell him about where this small town is, and I say, look, this is the story. I don't know how I can get any more information without jeopardizing myself. Would you mind just looking into it? Checking with that police department, that small town's police department. And so he goes, yeah, I'll look into it. I actually have a friend in that department. And I was like, oh wow, this is it. I could actually have a safe in to talk to somebody, and we might make some headway here. And a couple of days go by. I'm going to be seeing him, and so I was like, hey, actually, no, before I see him, I believe it's a call from him. And all he says, and I mean, this is what got me really nervous after this point. He goes, back off. Just, Stephen, back off. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, I'm on the case. I'm not going to pursue the police if you don't think I should. He's like, no, you shouldn't. And you need to back off. And he's not the type to be stern or that type of person. And I'm like, okay. And I was like, and I go, did you talk to your friend? And he just goes, just stop right there. Just stop. So at that point, I'm halfway through this case and I'm already unnerved by everything. That got me a little more rattled. That I don't know what he was told, and I don't know why he told me to stop and back off. I'm pretty sure it's because I shouldn't be diving any more into it. Maybe he was concerned for me, but I just don't know. Maybe later on I can have a conversation with him about it, but nothing more came of that. But that was definitely unnerving to hear from someone that's close to me, just kind of blatantly tell me, stop talking about it, just don't ask anymore, back off. Um, the next thing that happened was I interviewed a reporter who did a full cover story on this particular case. I'm not cover story, but he covered the story fully with great detail. And this reporter actually got word to the family of both murder victims that I was doing this case. And I kind of didn't want that to happen because the person who did this act could very well have been a family member. So again, things were getting out that we were working on this case and I was trying to keep it safe and secure, and it was still slipping out of my hands. And so I get a phone call, I get a phone call from one of the murder victims' family members, the male victim's niece. And I decided to go ahead and let's document the call. Let's have a full interview. And I just decided in the end that it wasn't. I didn't feel right putting that in the episode. Um, she had a lot of great things to say about her uncle and her frustrations with the case and her beliefs and what she thinks really happened and who really did it. But that's all things I did not want to put out there. And the other thing that rattled me from that phone call was just the more detail she gave me about how the incident happened and the details of the murder itself. And then she even told me, you need to watch out. And I just was like, I don't like where this is going. This case is getting way further out of reach than I wanted it to. I'm now talking directly to a murder victim's niece who was like his daughter. And it was hard. It was hard to have those conversations because that's not where I had ever envisioned the show going. I was going to tell ghost stories, like interview people with their personal ghost stories. Now this was involving an open double homicide with victims and victims' families wanting answers. And I knew like deep down that they would want this to be the answer to solve this unsolved crime. And I didn't want to give them that false hope because I honestly don't think, and I never thought we would solve this crime. Hold on 1 second. I gotta relight this through my mouth. There we go. But yeah, I had many nights sitting right here where I'm sitting. Out there is I have a very large backyard for Austin. It's ridiculously large. And I have a storage shed right over here to the left. And so I'm going to tell you some more personal stories. I sit out here with some lanterns and my notepad, and I like to listen to my audio and take notes. And while I'm on a case, I'm constantly listening to the audio for clues for just the next lead or the next rabbit hole I'm going to go down. And listening to everything in that case over and over again out here. Maybe it was just my nerves, but I started to feel something that I never felt before on my property, and that was I felt a presence out there near my shed, and it felt like a male presence looking at me, and it just it was ominous. To make matters worse, my little dog Coda, who's still kind of a pup at the time, suddenly picked up the habit of growling, like with her haunches up, and barking in that direction. And so, I'm listening to all this audio, I'm doing all this work on this case, it's unnerving me, and then that happens, and I start to feel uncomfortable here. Um, Not in the house. I do a lot of Palo Santo and things that Alexis has taught me, and I feel safe. But I'd never really done anything out here, so Alexis guided me through several different ceremonies to do on my own. Even though I kept doing them, it didn't feel a whole lot better throughout this whole case. And it got so bad one night that Tao had to go away on a shoot, and she was gone for several days. And I had just gotten off the phone with one of the male victim's family member, and I was just so unnerved and rattled that night that I ended up calling a friend who is a producer of one of the producers on the show, Bo. And I said, Bo, can you just like come over here right now? I'm having this weird like freak out, and I feel like something's here, and I need to talk to somebody. And he came. We had some whiskey out in the front porch, and we talked about it. Um, Ironically enough, after the case was over, I invited Sarah over to kind of just talk about it. And I wanted to get her final thoughts on the case, but the case was kind of wrapped up in good. The one thing that wasn't was this thing bothered me so much that we never got any answers for these murder victims. So I wanted to sit her down off record and ask her, do you know anything else that you didn't tell me? And so she went through a few things, and she says, obviously this is too dangerous to like put out there because, we don't want the family members to jump to conclusions based on what she's reading, because she herself doesn't even know half the time what she's reading and if it's right. She's just spitting out what she sees or what she hears. And she went through some things and told me some specific things that she got that she felt were characteristics of the murder. And I was able to look at the notes of the suspects, and they matched one of the suspects. And so I ended up showing her the photographs of the suspects, and she did agree that it was the one that matched. It was the same one that matched the things about that person. So she has just some outside influence on like who it could be, but she even is unaware if that's 100% accurate. And I would never want to put that out there because it's just a psychic impression, Our hope lies in that what Elaine Ireland said on her last call is like they will find peace, and this will get solved. I'm going to talk about something right now about what Elaine refers to as the find. And she refers to this as every person, a spirit or a spirit or a group of spirits in this case, there is someone out there that is supposed to find the answer to this. And Elaine's been on cases where she's been pulled into missing persons cases, homicide cases, and she's been utilized by, police, and so has other psychics in this world. And sometimes it's just not their find, and there's something working beyond our control that someone whose find it is to find this clue, to find this answer, is out there, and their path will cross with these spirits eventually. And we don't know if that's Martin who lives there. Maybe that's why he was getting so many messages. I don't know if that is another tenant that will come later in the home, or it could be one of these police detectives that finally snaps and realizes I need to get this information to the right people, or they need to follow their gut, like what Elaine was suggesting, that she feels that they have a gut feeling of who it might be, but it's so off target and not what everybody else thinks that they're not pursuing it. And that's another option that might happen. But it might be that police officers find, it might be Martin's find, it might be another tenant's find. We don't know. And that's the thing that bothers me the most about this case, is that we didn't have much closure there. But we can't expect to on every case. We can't expect to solve everything. And this one was a tough one to accept, because I kind of knew that going in. And my heart goes out to the families of the victims and the victims themselves. And I just hope and pray that one day that person whose find it is to find out who did this and get that information to the right people does so. I don't think it was my find. I don't think it was Sarah's find. I don't think it was Elaine's find. But who knows? In time, it might be. So we just have to wait patiently. We did everything we could to empower those spirits, to enlighten them as far as we can. And now it just takes time to see if the right paths cross to lead to the right answers. I'm going to take this moment to go over some of the questions. I don't know if I can answer them all. I'll try. I don't know how long this thing can run. I don't know how long this video recording lasts. So I'm sorry if I get cut off. One question was, is the family still living there? Has the activity completely ceased after the cleansing ceremony was performed? The family is still living there. And I have to say, Martin looks incredibly positive and happy, and he's reported that things are so much better. He's gotten a job again. He's working all the time. Now that I call him, he's always working. I went by and saw him just about 2 weeks ago, and I recorded a little video without showing his face of an update, and I'll post that if I can on this Patreon as well. But in the meantime, yeah, they're doing great. They do still have experiences, but they're not frightening experiences anymore. They are more like letting them know they're there, and then they have this sort of moment, and then it just passes. And they don't know if it's the same spirit. They do feel that the male presence, the older male presence, is still there, but he's very respectful of the property, and I think he's respecting Martin now. But that's because Martin is doing the things that we have asked him to do. He has planted a rose bush in the front. He's taking care of the yard. The house is immaculate. Like, if you go now, it's entirely clean. It's completely different than when we first got there. Also, Veronica reports that there was some questions about Isaac, the son. He is doing much better. He's less stressed. And what's really great is that on another follow-up we went to after we finished the episodes, Veronica is doing the cascarilla, the ceremony that Alexis told her to do. And what's great is that that's exactly what should be happening. You can't get rid of something or protect someone just with one single cleansing. Alexis is teaching us that. You have to keep it up. You have to do it routinely. It has to become part of your practice. And that's why I do that here with Palo Santo and certain things. I'm actually making my own incense now with intention and burning it. And I now burn it and walk around the whole property, because now I'm working within the realm of the paranormal with the spirit. And I didn't know this, but now I'm inviting things, because of my dabbling in this realm, and I need to be careful and I need to protect my space. So Alexis is teaching me that as well. The last bit too that's interesting, I didn't finish telling you, is that when Sarah came to tell me about her final thoughts on the case, she literally came to the backyard and said, "Oh, you got something back there. You need to take care of that." So that was another crazy instance that happened, that I was like, oh crap. I had just told her that I felt something weird on the property, and she sure enough pointed out exactly where I felt it. And so I did some ceremonies and some cleansings, and I feel much better now. I'm out here now and I feel good. So there's some more questions. What's been the most frustrating aspect of the investigation? Literally what I had talked about is it. It was unnerving. It was rattling. I was really worried about putting my friends and family in situations like this. But the fact that we can't solve this and there's no real answers for the families now, I wish we could have done that. It just wasn't possible. And I think someone else will in time. Do you think that the disarray of the property and both the previous tenants and even the state that I believe you've referred to it was with this family created a perfect storm for energies to make themselves known? It's an interesting theory. Yeah, I mean, I think what Alexis and I have always talked about is that your environment, it reflects and it reflects your current, like, your output of energy. And I think if the environment is negative, which I think everybody would agree that a dirty, messy environment, an unorganized environment is more negative than positive, that negative energy and atmosphere can really take hold. And so I think that's what was going on, why that male presence was upset. And it could be vice versa, that the male presence was just upset because his property wasn't being taken care of, and so then he acted out. But it could also mean that the negative energy within the space was causing his spirit to sort of absorb that negativity and act out on it. So it's really hard to say, but I do believe that that's a big thing that I like to try to keep up here and keep my house tidy and clean. And lately it's been a disaster. So I'm trying to get it clean. I'm Palo Santo the house, but I need to physically clean the house as well. I think that's an important thing to consider when we're looking at cases and hauntings and experiences like this. I'm going to go through some of these that are a little bit quicker. Someone asked about, like, with haunted places, is there a smell or feel in the atmosphere that can be detected? Often in movies and places that look scary, you can imagine that they smell or feel uncomfortable. No smells for me, obviously. I don't ever get that sort of sensation. You do feel uncomfortable in a situation like this when you walk into a home that obviously has this already, like, traumatic, tragic event that happened. You feel that, but I think it's also, you have to look at that and say, is that just my mind reading that? Like, I know it happened, so I'm feeling uneasy about it. But then the house being messy and all the activity happening around these certain spaces made that worse, you know. But no smells. You definitely feel a little heavy, ominous feeling. But again, I can't decipher if that's just because I knew what had happened there previous to going, because I did, or if it's just an actual energy that you feel because of the negative energy that resides there. Um, I don't know. I think that's pretty much it. I kind of answered a lot of my questions, I think, in the actual video diary. So I really hope that you enjoyed this. Sorry I had to duck out and disappear for a second. And I hope that these kind of improve and get better over time. But I'm just going to post them raw, unedited, just the way they are. And I'm going to do these more often if I can squeeze them in. It's really tough with the schedule, but I love doing this, and I want to provide you patrons with some amazing extra content, which we got more coming out, so get ready. We got the Manny sessions already being edited. They're being cleaned up and almost about to be out. We also have some potential extra episodes that won't air, that we visited some places that are just, they're smaller and they're just too short that I really don't want to put them onto a full episode series release. And I think they're going to be perfect Patreon extras. And we're going to be rolling out some Patreon tier levels probably in another month or two. So that means, like, different levels will have different access to certain things. So stay tuned for that. But we're gonna hold off on that for another month or two and give you a lot of good extra content first, and let you be experiencing what this new Patreon experience will be like. Because we've got actual people now helping me manage the Patreon, because we've gotten volunteers and interns and some incredible team members that are going to help me expand the show and provide these amazing opportunities for people like you that support the show. So thank you so much for doing that. We couldn't really keep the show afloat if it wasn't for Patreon. It's the number one source of reliable income coming in for the show. If I didn't have it, I literally wouldn't be able to keep it going. So thank you so much. And we'll be in touch soon. Bye.